when I really started my first business, it was 40 or 24 years old. I started my CPA practice down here in Utah County.
Awesome. Sounds like we have something in common. I started my very first business when I was 24.
And so there was a lot of young college students that needed work and flexible hours. And so I got offered to be a branch manager of this sales floor. My background at that time was in sales. I mean, as I grew from high school and shortly after my mission, I just went into sales, and it was over the phone sales. That's a tough game. So, but I did fairly well there, and eventually got promoted to opening up an office in Logan, Utah, and we ended up recruiting an insane amount of college students, and we would sell theater ad placements and then also clean family entertainment over the phone. I didn't like the one thing that I saw right on early on in professional service world was that it was always an hourly rate. Drove me crazy.
Oh,
Like I hated it. So I started selling customers on paying a monthly fee.
oh,
And then I
nice.
said, here's all the stuff that we will include over the course of the year. So we started building up a recurring stream pretty fast, and it was unique. And we took a position statement that we're the most proactive tax and advisory firm out there to ensure that you're going to pay the least amount of tax legally possible, and also ensure that your business is in the best financial position it can be. And we'll do this by holding these quarterly reviews with you. And it worked. I mean, I didn't know anything about accounting, but people loved it, and so
People
they
love the
started coming
aggression.
in. I read a lot of books. It doesn't matter how you get educated, like you're saying, Chris. There are the formal ways and institutional education, but the degree at the end doesn't matter. It's what you know and how you
Yeah.
apply what you know. So that's when I asked Rob, who did that with me, hey, I really want to work with Dennis, is what I told him. And specifically, I had a handful of healthcare tech. So we had to shift from real estate. Just keep that in mind.
Right, right,
So
right.
because real estate was falling, I had to start picking up different clientele. And we started focusing in the healthcare and the oral healthcare space and doing consulting with them. And I came across some doctors that were doing extremely well. And it was coincidental, Chris, that a doctor following one of my very successful doctors came in, and I was reviewing his plan with him for the quarter. And I saw some huge differences and variances. The interesting thing is their top line revenue was very similar, but the bottom line revenue was drastically different. One of them was taking over $500,000 a year. The other one was taking home less than $100,000 a year
Wow.
and had buried on student debt. Like he was, it that was not enough for him to survive off. And
Right.
I think he had over $500,000 of student debt and another practice debt of close to $1 million. Like the guy was, he was hurting, and you could see it on him. And so it was coincidental that I just got done working with the other orthodontist before working with this orthodontist. And so I said, hey, any chance I could get you in a room and we can just learn together from this other doctor that I just met with? I'll call him up if you're open to it. And let's just create this working session to where we're learning together. And that was my introduction to seeing what this doctor was doing very manually of getting data information on activities, not outcomes, but activities with his patients and activities with his team members. So human being performance tracking, right?
Right.
And it
Yes.
was all done on Excel. And when I saw it, I was like, well, no kidding. I mean, this is just business 101. You've got to track activities and performance to lead you to the result. And that kept me up for 2 weeks. Like, how do I turn from a service organization to a true software organization? I didn't even know if it was possible. I had a friend of mine that was selling one of his software companies at the same time. And I said, can you take a look at this with me? This was about a week after our lunch, and just tell me if I could turn this into what's known as a software as a service. I mean, I didn't even really understand that at this time.
Right.
And he spent about 2 weeks looking at what we were doing and told me not only can you do it, but you need to do it. Like the market's crying for this. There's nothing out there in healthcare tech that does what you're talking about. We ended up hiring another executive team, and I stepped down about 2 years ago. And since that time, I've just been doing investments and managing portfolios. But I did take on another CE role of one of my investments right now, and we're getting this company up and running. So a little bit of a
That's
history.
do your diligence. Make sure you're talking to the references. Because you're exactly right. They're going to give you a list of three references that are their best references, but you got to be able to get in, and I think that's great advice for young entrepreneurs that are looking to someday do an exit, whether it's to private equity or strategic or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. So let's shift gears. Family. So you have 6 kids, and you've built all these businesses. How do you balance that?
It's hard. It's hard. I at first I don't think I did a good job balancing it. I mean, during the first startup company that I did with Lunsford Peck, it was crazy challenging and I wasn't around. Fortunately, at that time I only had my oldest son as I was spinning that up, and my daughter was just being born. And so he was 3 to 4, but even then, all the way through his adolescent ages, I was not home a lot. I had a crazy supportive wife. And one thing that I found that if you do have a family and you're an entrepreneur, you've got to have a support system at home, because you're not going to be able to be successful if they're not willing to support you in it. And it does require some sacrifices. Some people will say balance, healthy quality, balance, like this work life balance. I'm going to say BS for a minute, Chris, because it's just not possible if you're trying to get something up and really see crazy high growth success. There's not a balance.
Right.
And balance is not necessarily 50-50, 50 life, 50 work, because I think that's what some people think in their mind. That's not the case. A balance to me, and what I had to work through with my wife, was this is what I can give you right now. And this is what I've got to give my company. And are we in alignment there? And then if we're not in alignment, we've got to get on the same page of what more I've got to bring over this way, because family honestly is the most important thing to me. But it's tough when you get caught up in this circle of who do I serve more and who needs my time more at this time. And the easy answer for people to hear is, well, of course, that's your family, but that's not always the
Right.
reality. You got to remember that if you got 250 employees or 500, you got all of their families that you've got to worry about too. And the reality is, as a CEO, I mean, one of the things that I've learned, um, a successful CEO has to have the ability to focus and make the best moves when there really are no good moves. And it was at that moment that it really dawned on me, like it was just this light bulb. My family has been just as part of growing this. I remember that we were all in when we moved into our space. I was so cheap. This is the accountant side of me, so cheap on spending money that I recruited my family to go put together all my chairs that I bought, like 200 Herman Miller chairs that we needed
Yes.
to get the base
Yes.
on. And we were doing this overnight, but include them in the growth of the company, because that's also quality time. And then they get to see your passion and what you're working on, and they feel equally part of that. I can remember when my son was on his mission and I told him, hey son, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be going to the board and announcing to them that I'm going to be stepping down and we need to find a new CEO. And he just went white. Like, to him, he's like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you do that? This is who you are. He
Is
was
your
so proud of
identity.
it. I do feel like I did a good job over the years of making sure my family was part of the growth of the company too. And my
That's
wife,
cool.
man, so important that they're a sounding board to you. You got to be able to come home to her and tell her the good things and the things you're struggling with. I would never tell your wife all the bad stuff, but I would tell your spouse, wife or husband, whatever it is. I would tell your spouse the things you're struggling with, meaning seek for some counsel and advice, because they've really got good advice and they know you better than anyone else. So they know what you can and can't handle. And I've learned that a lot with Kirsten. She's been a huge support for me over the years. So